to the debate on the appropriation bill, and conscious that shortly there'll be the process of interrogation in some more detail, so I'll keep my remarks general and perhaps give some preview of areas of particular interest. But first, can I say, Deputy Speaker, that I think it's been rightly observed in the sort of in the immediate aftermath of the handing down of the budget that this is one that the government would very quickly want to see forgotten and moved on from. And I think that that's fairly obvious reasons for that. Because, and this is, I might say, finally appearing to have gotten to the point where people are now seriously concerned, seriously disturbed to see that the trend in terms of both ongoing, repeated, more or less generalised budget blowouts, agency by agency, and at the same time, what is now a staggering amount of state debt, both now and over every year of the forward estimates. And I think that might be underscored by there having been no real indication that the debt will peak even at the end of the forward estimates. So I think in remarks in preview of this budget, a day or so before it was handed down, I kind of predicted the front page of the paper on the following day, and I think my prediction was pretty much bang on, except that not even I had predicted that the debt would have blown out to quite as much as it has. It's now, as we've all seen, heading north of $53.7 billion of debt for South Australia, and that's off the back of those front page headlines on the previous 2 years that have seen escalations from the mid-40s to the high 40s and now well in excess of $50 billion. And we can only shudder to think what might be ahead for us when we hear any future budgets from this Malinowskis Labor government that's now, let's face it, relatively long in the tooth, and now with this sorry record of extraordinary debt blowing out as far as the eye can see. And we've heard a lot made, Deputy Speaker, of the major capital projects that are contributing to the level of state debt, and two in particular that enjoy bipartisan, as far as I'm aware, unanimous support around the state. First being Torrens to Darlington, the major infrastructure project that will complete those very important South Road works. That's a project that's coming in at a capital cost in excess of $15 billion. Let's face it, half of it paid for by the feds. So there's a figure around the 7.5 mark that's being met by South Australia, and then of course we've got the new Women's and Children's Hospital, long promised, that the government maintains is still on track, time and budget to come in at its projected cost of $3.2 billion. And you don't have to have much more than very elementary early primary mathematical capacities to figure out that the combination of those two key capital projects, much touted, even if they were to come in on time and on budget, and substantial as they are an impost on the state in the order of around $11 billion. So we see, meanwhile, state debt going from $34 billion out to $53.7, and we've got a couple of significant capital projects that go nowhere near accounting for that extraordinary extension, extraordinary increase in the state debt. And the only plan, the only stated process by which the government has indicated that it has a plan to pay off the debt is via these much touted budget surpluses that the government seems at the same time very glad to claim a lot of credit for. Now, for a start, first point might be made that the very modest budget surplus, cash surplus that's identified in the budget, somewhere in the order of 100 million or a little more, comes against the backdrop of enormous revenue windfall gains. And stamp duty and GST, not to mention payroll tax, stand out among those. And so the government finds itself banking windfall, that is, in excess to budgeted revenue amounts, receipts from those sources, just to name a few, and in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars, dwarfing the amount of the cash surplus. So we put that to one side and say, well, you know, but for these windfall gains, you've got a significant cash deficit. But then, even if you take that as the benchmark and say, all right, well, great, let's see cash surpluses have a go at that debt, which, by the way, is going to be costing the state billions a year in interest while it's still there. The plan to pay down the 53.7 billion debt, as presently advised, is going to come from the surpluses, and it's been rightly observed that leads us to a situation where for hundreds of years the state of South Australia will be applying cash surpluses of that nature to an eventual reduction of this enormous debt. It's clearly a fantasy, and it's clear that if that's the rationale, and we're talking about the government, not some sort of idle commentary, but government stated budget management, then South Australians can look on and say, well, under Malinauskas Labor, there is no prospect in reality of seeing the debt reduced, really anytime soon, if ever. And more to the point, look at the walk, not the talk. What have we seen over each year of this Malinauskas government? Just enormous increases in the amount of the state debt. So we'll all be having to keep a close watch on that at every step. So debt's a big deal, Deputy Speaker, and without a responsible government that's actually committed to debt reduction, which Malinauskas Labor clearly isn't, then the state is in for a wild ride indeed. The debt's enormous and growing. Now, compounding the absence of a real plan to pay down the debt, what have we seen in terms of agency competence and responsibility against their budgets? And it's not that complex, Deputy Speaker. I mean, there's lots of volumes of this state budget, but it all, follows a familiar pattern. And I just urge all South Australians to have a look. It's called Budget Paper 3, the budget statement, and on a single page there in the budget statement, we see a table setting out the operating expenses of the relevant government agencies. The government agencies there listed in alphabetical order, and very conveniently for all of us to see, for all South Australians to see, and to then sort of look at each agency and think, hang on, who's the responsible minister there, right? Easily identifiable. And we see there every single agency, every single one, with one exception, has blown its budget by massive proportions. And I'll get to that bottom line in a second. The exception, Deputy Speaker, the one that actually, whose estimated result is bang on target in accord with its 25-26 budget allocation, Guess who that is? That's the Audit Office of South Australia. That's the Audit Office that has met its budget. So, as we continue to receive those valuable reports from the Auditor-General over the journey, we can know that the Auditor-General can continue to do his important work with the clean hands, if you will, of the single agency that managed to meet its budget. The rest, all of them, have exceeded their budgets by so much that the combined excess to budget is north of $1.2 billion, and it's just for this year. And so, as has been made clear, the other figure that South Australians need to bear very squarely in mind when it comes to debt is that it's not look over here at these big capital projects, and what a great growth state of opportunity is going on, the result of completing capital projects that have bipartisan support. But look at a more basic level to just ordinary day-to-day competence and accountability, because within that you see the source of the capacity to really do something about debt. If you've got a competent government that says to South Australians, all right, here's the budgets we set for ourselves year after year, and then when it comes to reporting on those in the thing called the state budget, guess what? We've actually managed to meet our budgets. That alone would leave us in a position where we're $6 billion better off. But, the Malinowskis Labor government, is finding itself in this invidious position of costing South Australians and costing our budget collectively over these years more than substantially more than the cost of the new Women's and Children's Hospital, and in fact those combined budget blowouts, in the order of the state's contribution to the T2D, this great big capital project, generational capital project. So keep competence and accountability in mind when assessing it, and there it all is on page 23 of the budget statement. Debt and budget blowouts, Deputy Speaker, are extraordinary and enormous. Deputy Speaker, I'll just stay to refer to one initiative that's of keen interest in within my portfolio responsibilities for housing and planning, because we've seen much made of the government's, the Labor Party's election commitment in terms of housing, that it couched in terms of a headline, $1 billion commitment it's described as, and it was couched in terms of two equal $500 million components. One that was called a housing fast-track fund. The other one's called an apartment fast-track fund, and we'll have more to say about the housing, about the apartment one subsequently. That's about underwriting investment. The housing fast-track fund, described as a $500 million fast-track fund, is about acquiring, as we see on the face of the budget, strategic parcels of land. There's been some consideration of that in the parliamentary debate even just now. And the government's sort of, identified that there might be one such parcel, and there's been mention of some land at Warradale. And then there's been all sorts of various discussion about not, giving the game away too much and, getting into the market gradually and so on. But we're talking about a headline election commitment and a policy that's described as a $500 million housing fast-track fund. But what do we see in the budget, quite apart from the response to questions that have already been rightly raised? Well, we see in the budget that of this $500 million fund, this year's budget contains, not half of it, not even actually a tenth of it, or even a 20th of it. This year's budget provides for just $20 million of that $500 million, which is then said to be able to be there to secure and sell strategic land. Now, that's quite apart from investigating the merits of such a thing and how it might be applied in such a way that doesn't distort the market. But you know, in terms of just doing what you say you'll do, government's, the Labor Party's gone to the election promising a $500 million fast-track fund for housing, and then the budget seems to tell a completely different story, because the Housing Fast-Track Fund has the $20 million for this year, and if you're holding your breath for the other 480 perhaps in the following year, maybe it takes a little while to ramp up, well, you don't get any joy there either, because the following year only has another 20. And even the following year, we're still only getting another 25, and even the last year of the forward estimates, you know, as it sort of gets further and further away from present accountability, we still only see another 35 popping up. So a total of 100 that's heading us in the direction of this so-called $500 million fast-track fund. And so on that pace, while we're doing the maths, we're heading for, if we ever get there, this government's either, you know, hugely optimistic, or it's, you know, it's kind of hoping that, you know, by putting it somewhere at the back of the budget measure statement, people are going to be a bit slow to get round to reading it. It'll be 20 years down the track. It should be called the generational housing fund, perhaps. You know, that might let a level of grandiosity to it, while not, you know, being a false promise of it being any kind of fast track. But it is, if it wasn't so serious, in circumstances where we're in a housing crisis and the government's supposed to be having meaningful policy, that even the government's own stated and characterised election commitment about fast-tracking housing appears to have monumentally let South Australians down. And there's a trend in that takes us all the way to local projects, because, Deputy Speaker, residents in the town in which I've been very proud to live for these last 20 years, we celebrate 20 years this year, at Bridgewater, were the proud recipients, in response to really effective advocacy, of a government commitment at Bridgewater to build a pedestrian crossing, an improvement to safety at the centre of Bridgewater. And I welcome it. And it's a local commitment of the kind that we see in the election process, and it's a commitment that Labor made. And again, I'll just make specific reference to the relevant agency statement for the purpose of making this point, because it seems that some election commitments are more equal than others when it comes to the Labor Party and the Malinauskas Labor government that's just now, for the time being, in government in this state. You don't have to look too far down the list of new projects that are on their way, supposedly, to be delivered by the Department for Infrastructure and Transport to find the Bridgewater pedestrian crossing, and the $1.5 million that's allocated for that project. But unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, and you'll be disappointed to hear, as other members will as well, that we don't actually see $1.5 million in this year's budget for the completion of that election commitment. We don't see it. What we see, concerningly, is two bits of information. The first is that there's not $1.5 million, there's $200,000. All right, well, that's part of the 1.5 perhaps, but very concerningly, the estimated completion date is also set out against that project, and that tells us that the estimated completion date is not, you know, December this year and that's come in under budget. No, it's June 2029. So in June 2029, there might be a pedestrian crossing, and for the time being, there's $200,000 in this year's budget, who knows for what. And just to round out, Deputy Speaker, I asked the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport about progress on the Meadows roundabout at a recent sitting day, The answer I got from the Minister was that he thought it was on track for commencement in 2026. Guess what? The department's website's just been updated and works aren't going to start, apparently, until 2027.